For millions of people, Jordan Peterson's voice meant something. And right now, he's in pain that most of us can't even imagine. I'm not talking about controversy or culture wars. Forget the debates or the trending headlines. This is about a 63-year-old man, a husband, father, and grandfather, facing a neurological condition so brutal that his own daughter, Michaela, said it's the worst suffering she's ever witnessed, and she knows pain firsthand. Michaela spent 2.5 years battling her own debilitating illness, watched her mom come close to dying, faced an autoimmune disease, and cared for her hospitalized newborn. Still, nothing compares to what she saw her father go through. Just sit with that for a second. Michaela isn't one for drama. She doesn't exaggerate. She's careful, she's steady, and she's earned her understanding of suffering the hard way. Living through it, not reading about it. If she says something like that, she means it. So today, you'll hear the real story, not rumors, not wild guesses, not headlines stripped of context. The whole truth, what's actually happening, how it started, what it means for Peterson's family, and what it could mean for millions walking straight into something similar without knowing. This isn't just about one man, it's bigger than that. Let's rewind. Jordan Burnt Peterson was born June 12, 1962, in Edmonton, Alberta. He grew up in Fairview, a small town out in the northern Alberta prairie. If you haven't seen that part of Canada, think long, icy winters, and endless quiet. A place so removed you feel cut off, both physically and emotionally. For Peterson, it churned something inside him. He was both introspective and restless. He was a quiet kid, intense, always reading, always questioning. He wanted real answers. Why do people suffer? Why do they hurt each other? Why is meaning so fragile, yet so crucial? Those questions stuck with him. They became his life's work. He studied political science, shifted to psychology, not so much as a career move, but because he felt called to it. After his doctorate at McGill, he joined Harvard's faculty, then moved to University of Toronto. His research dove into belief, mythology, religious symbolism, and the roots of totalitarianism. He wanted to know why ordinary people commit extraordinary evil. Where does meaning come in? Can it really protect against that? For years, he was respected in academia, pretty much unknown outside it. That changed in 2016. Canada's government proposed a law about compelled speech and gender pronouns. Peterson posted lectures objecting to what he saw as ideological overreach. The internet exploded. Suddenly, millions cheered him on, feeling like someone had finally spoken the truth. Others saw him as a threat. He didn't back down. He jumped right in and found himself at the heart of the decade's biggest culture storm. In 2018, 12 Rules for Life hit shelves. 5 million copies sold the first year, more than 10 million eventually. It wasn't politics, it was about personal responsibility, meaning, and facing hardship. A guide from someone who'd spent decades listening to broken people and knew deep down that life doesn't bargain. The book struck a chord with readers desperate for someone who treated life's challenges seriously. Sold out arenas across the globe, interviews everywhere, a podcast with millions of listeners. Peterson's influence was so huge that some academics focused just on critiquing him, while whole communities lined up to defend him. But underneath all that, beyond the books, debates, and spotlights, there was another story brewing. Depression runs deep in the Peterson family, not the kind that disappears with exercise and sunshine. Something darker. Peterson called it the kind that makes you unable to get off the couch for decades. His father had it, his grandfather had it. That shadow stretches back generations, each person finding their own way through it. Peterson started antidepressants in the 1990s. The depression was so bad, he couldn't lecture, couldn't think, couldn't function. Doctors told him what everyone heard back then. The pills fix a chemical imbalance, like vitamins for your brain. He believed them. Why wouldn't he? The medicine helped, for a while. He regained enough stability to build his career. Then Tammy, his wife, got sick. She was diagnosed with a rare kidney cancer. Doctors gave her months to live. Peterson couldn't sleep. Anxiety took over, and so the doctors added another drug, clonazepam, a benzodiazepine, to help with the relentless fear. He wasn't chasing pleasure, he was desperate to sleep, desperate for relief. The doctors said it was the right intervention. That's when everything went off the rails. Peterson and his family didn't know, and most patients, honestly, most doctors, still don't fully understand, that benzodiazepines are some of the most dependency-forming drugs out there. Not in the usual way, not about pleasure, but in a way that's sneakier and nastier. The brain literally rewires itself around these drugs. Stop them too fast, or if the meds start causing harm, your nervous system reacts harshly, almost violently. There's nothing quite like it in standard medicine. By late 2019, it was obvious clonazepam was doing more damage than good. Peterson decided to quit. He went to Russia for a medically supervised detox, under sedation. The process was grueling. He needed intensive care just to make it through the worst part. He got home in January 2020 and hasn't touched psychiatric meds since. Recovery took over 5 years. Slow, painful, messy. But he made real progress. Friends say he rebuilt himself after something that would have destroyed most people. Tammy survived her cancer. The family went through losses that seemed impossible, but came out the other side, scarred but standing, with life finally looking stable again. Then came 2025. Both of Peterson's parents died in the same year. That grief would crush anyone. For someone whose nervous system was already battered, thanks to years of neurological injury, grief wasn't just emotional. It was a physical trigger. Throw in a cross-country move, selling the family house full of memories, and, as fate would have it, exposure to mold during a medical treatment at a hotel. The old injury woke up, and this time, it came back even harder. The first hint that something was off showed up in August 2024. It didn't come with drama or alarms blaring, just the quiet, uncertain way big medical problems often show up for people who've already been through a lot. First, there were some odd neurological symptoms, just little discomforts and spikes in sensitivity, the kind of stuff you can brush off as stress or grief, the aftermath of a tough life. For nearly 6 months, the real problem hid behind wrong diagnoses. It wasn't for lack of trying. Specialists, hospitals, everyone the family thought would see what regular doctors missed took a shot. Still, no luck. The symptoms were there, clear and relentless, but the doctors kept fitting them into the wrong story. And all that time, as the medical system twisted itself in circles, Peterson kept getting sicker. Then he caught pneumonia. That's a big deal for anyone, but for a 63-year-old man whose nervous system was already in bad shape, it was a real threat. It turned into sepsis, a raging infection that overwhelms the body and can wreck your organs in a heartbeat. He landed in the hospital. His family, already frayed and exhausted, had to stare down the possibility that this was the end. But he pulled through. The sepsis, the pneumonia. What he didn't dodge were the aftershocks of the hospital stay. The medications they gave him, standard, routine stuff, chosen by doctors who didn't know the whole story, made the original neurological problem even worse. It was only after things got that bad, after all the wrong turns, that the family finally saw it for what it was. Akathisia. Most people have never even heard the word. It won't show up on your social feed. It's not headline news, but ask anyone who's lived it, and they'll tell you it's about as tormenting as anything the brain can dish out. So what is it, really? The medical definition, restlessness, doesn't even scratch the surface. Michaela, Peterson's daughter, once said that calling it restlessness made her want to hit someone. She laughed, but she meant it. Akathisia is a kind of internal torture. There's no rest, no comfort. You can't sit still, can't lie down, can't escape it, morning or night. It isn't anxiety, not the way most of us think of it, with racing thoughts or nerves that settle eventually. This is agony living in your flesh, separate from anything outside you, and nothing from the outside can touch it. Michaela tried to describe what it felt like for her, and she says her case was gentle compared to her father's. It was like a tidal wave of dread she couldn't explain, like falling, non-stop. Some days, the only thing that helped was hugging herself and rocking. The restlessness invaded her whole body. Everything she looked at seemed pixelated and colorless. Music hurt. Lights hurt. TV was unbearable. Bed was no relief. In the end, she would just lie in a dark room, fighting off panic, second by second. That was her mild version. According to her, her father's is far worse. Now for a man who made his name by shaping language, By giving people words for their pain, it's its own kind of cruelty to end up inside something so relentless that words won't work. He spent his career telling people that naming their darkness is how you start to fight it, that stories about suffering help you endure. He gave millions of people a language for their struggles. But with akathisia, language does nothing. Stories and frameworks and rules, all the intellectual tools he built, don't touch it. It lives underneath all of that, in the biology, in the nervous system, in the mitochondria, Michaela says. It's damage at the cellular level, where even the energy your body runs on gets scrambled. And here's where it gets bigger than just his story. 1 in 6 Americans take psychiatric meds now, probably more. Most have been on them for over 5 years. When people started, they were told it was safe, that it would balance their brain chemistry. Long term, no sweat. Michaela, backed by research, says that's not true. The new science on how psychiatric drugs mess with mitochondria isn't fringe stuff. It's real, rigorous work in respected journals. The evidence shows that drugs like SSRIs and benzos, used for a long time, can actually damage these cell powerhouses in ways that linger, even after you quit the meds. Sometimes, physical stress years later can set it all off again. That's what happened to Peterson. She isn't telling anyone to ditch their meds. She's saying everyone deserves full warning about the risks before they start. Real informed consent, something medicine prides itself on, isn't happening the way it should with psychiatric drugs. Tens of millions could face what her father is living through, spending months misdiagnosed because their doctors don't even know this can happen. And there's another twist, one that's hard to face. Peterson spent years preaching responsibility, telling people to stand up straight, to take charge. Critics say he didn't always show enough sympathy for those boxed in by biology or circumstance. Now it's him, after following the medical advice he trusted, injured by medicines he was supposed to be able to count on. No act of will, nothing he could have done, would have stopped this. No posture, no inner resolve can fix it now. He used to say life doesn't negotiate. Now he knows it in his bones. There's more. A genetic condition called chronic inflammatory response syndrome means some folks react to certain toxins, like mold, by triggering inflammation so deep that their mitochondria just shut down. The symptoms mimic a million other things, so it's almost always missed. Michaela thinks this genetic factor links back to the depression running through their family, passed down not as a failing but as biology, and the system responded the only way it knew: more meds. Over time, those fixes dug an even deeper hole. Think about that. The medication meant to treat depression might actually have set the stage for the catastrophe mold exposure brought on decades later. The treatment and the trigger, tangled up across years in ways doctors never saw coming. Michaela, 25 weeks pregnant, finally manages to film an update about her father's health after months of trying and failing. She didn't wait because there was nothing to say. She just couldn't get through it without breaking down. Every day, almost without a break, she's cried. For nearly a year. Can you imagine telling someone that? The honesty it takes? It's not just about tears, either. It's about a woman who's felt suffering so deeply. Most of us will never understand what that kind of pain costs. She's survived things that would have shattered anyone else. Now pregnant, holding her family together, watching her father fight something she can't fix, day after day, every day, crying as he battles through misery she can't remove. Tammy, his wife, is there too. People describe her as a quiet pillar, the kind you don't realize you're leaning on until everything else collapses. She beat a cancer diagnosis that threatened to take her in months. In 2023, she embraced Catholicism. Julian, their son, stays close. This family, already shoved far past what's normal, holds tight around a man who needs them. And they're doing the thing you do when you're out of ideas and abilities. They're staying through the worst when most would walk away or fall apart. Faith carries them now. That wasn't always the case. 10 years ago, you wouldn't have guessed it. Tammy's conversion, Michaela's Christianity, Peterson himself, the guy who spent hours exploring the psychological truth buried in religious stories, never really claiming a faith for himself out loud, finds himself with faith, whatever shape it takes for someone so fiercely intellectual, as something real, something needed, something that anchors him when pain strips everything else away. In private, with suffering, he leans on faith, and those who know him say it matters. Michaela says that without this faith, without their love for her father, and without the way they've learned to communicate in hard times, they would have broken. The family has come close, she admits, but they haven't fallen. The path out of akathisia isn't a straight line or a quick fix. There's no surgery, no magic pill, no shortcut. Time is what's needed, and an almost obsessive avoidance of anything that might trigger the nervous system. Certain foods, supplements, medicines, stress, environmental toxins, even preservatives. The diet they follow is insanely restrictive, not because they read about it or wanted to try something trendy, but because their bodies demand it. It's a grind, it's exhausting, but it's necessary. Patience, faith, endurance without a clear finish line. That's what healing asks for. Michaela believes there's light now. They finally have the right diagnosis and the right doctors. The family knows what must be avoided. The slow healing they managed before seems possible again. The body and brain want to heal, she says. It's wired into us. Given the right environment, enough time, recovery happens. But Peterson isn't there yet. That's the hardest part. This is where I want to talk about a different kind of courage. One almost invisible to the world. People celebrate the courage of public spectacles, facing angry crowds, defending ideas, changing the conversation, and it brings applause, headlines, a sense that you matter. But the courage Peterson is living now is private and relentless. There's no crowd, no applause, just the dirty grinding work of everyday survival. Waking up, feeling like your own body is enemy territory, and deciding again and again to keep going. To eat the right food, avoid the things that trigger misery, try to rest when rest comes, endure when it doesn't, and trust, even on days when trust feels impossible, the body will heal, given enough time. No one writes books about this. No one cheers this kind of courage. Yet, in all honesty, maybe this is the hardest kind. There's something Peterson said during a particularly dark stretch of his life. He admitted he'd often hoped he would die. Then he said, "I've been grateful for good things, but I don't think I was grateful enough before for just mundane normality." If you can sit down and breathe, there are lots of people who don't have that. Now he knows that truth in his bones. The man who gave millions the words to make sense of suffering is now somewhere beyond words. No framework fits. It's just him and his family versus the silence between two moments of pain, with nothing but stubbornness driving him forward. What does this mean for people who took his advice seriously? Honestly, it makes you realize his work was more real and raw than critics admitted. He never said rules would shield you or that meaning would erase pain. He said meaning made pain bearable. That suffering with purpose and suffering without it is the difference between keeping a life together and letting it all fall apart. He's testing that belief now in the most personal way possible. Here's the warning. Michaela is explicit, careful, and urgent about it. Millions on psychiatric medications never hear the risks. Doctors rarely explain that long-term use can change your nervous system, or that stopping too fast can leave you injured for years. And those injuries almost always look like the original problem, so doctors prescribe more meds, more damage, more agony. 1 in 6 Americans. Most for years, most never warned. Peterson taught that the truth matters because it's useful. You look reality in the eye, even if it's painful, because that's where honest hope lives. The reality here is ugly. Understanding akathisia, what medications do over years, and how healing works when the medical world isn't teaching it, might be among the most useful things someone can learn. This isn't just about one famous man. It's about the neighbor who's been on antidepressants for over a decade and doesn't understand what withdrawal could mean. It's about your sister who's been on anxiety meds for so long, neither she nor her doctor have considered the risks. It's about millions of everyday people, ordinary and uncelebrated, who might find themselves in the same darkness Peterson faces now, with no one to tell their story, no one to warn the world. He's clawed his way back from this before, possibly from even darker places. He rebuilt himself after pain that would have destroyed most people. The right doctors are involved now. The family knows the terrain. The conditions for healing are finally in place. But at the core, stripped of fame, stripped of books, stripped of arenas and culture wars, Peterson is simply what he's always said everyone is: fragile, limited, desperate for meaning. meeting other people, still standing, and in that raw, lonely, absolutely unglamorous reality, still standing. There's maybe more truth and humanity than any speech he ever gave. The world listened to Peterson because he didn't look away from suffering. He said it's real, and it isn't leaving, but you can carry it. Now suffering has come home. Now darkness sits in his body, in his nervous system, in the quiet breaks between pain. The family is still here. Faith is still here. And the plain, stubborn will to get through just today is still here. Then tomorrow. Then another day. This isn't the stuff of fairy tales. Honestly, it's better than that. It's the truth. If someone you love is on medication long-term and hasn't talked about what that means, share this story, not to scare them, but because they need the facts. And if this reached you at the perfect moment, the way things sometimes do, let others know, stay connected, and come back for what's next. See you soon.